Good morning to everybody. I think this is a great opportunity and a very esteemed panel that we have this morning. I want to introduce the panel to you. Firstly, we have Mr. Dani Bano, the chairperson of SEMVES, Mr. Peter Verkow, the president of Agri SA, Mr. Lofen Renan, the CEO of Beefmaster, Mr. Jaco Minnaar, the deputy president of Agri SA, and Omri van Zyl, the CEO of Agri SA. So welcome to this panel. We are concentrating on the role that the agri-businesses and specifically also the producers in the respective value chains in South Africa. It's the competitiveness of our value chains which will determine the sustainability of our food security in South Africa. And generally, we have a very and an actually excellent food system in place in South Africa. In this crisis, we've seen governments, even private sector business acknowledging the great role that agriculture and the agro-food system, the agro-fiber, agro-beverage systems play in South Africa. But we face these great challenges of disruption in the world supply chains, the world value chains through COVID. We've got to think anew. And basically, we have the best minds together today to explore how value chains are going to evolve now during COVID and then subsequently. I want to start by Pierre, as president of Agri SA. Obviously, the producers play an incredibly important role in producing food, and your food goes down the value chain. Many producers are also integrated in the value chain. How do you see the value chains evolving post-COVID-19?
It's very difficult to say because this is going to influence us in a different manner. As Francois said, we're talking about a new reality. All I can say, the country, we know that the value chain has been impacted by COVID-19 in a very negative manner from the agricultural producers' point of view. Because as if the value chain as a whole didn't have the confidence to take off the product, because they don't necessarily know whether, especially in the meat side, whether the product is going to be sold or whether it's going to go bad on the shelf or whether the people will be able to buy it. And taking in consideration, the old fact that lots of people are staying at home, salaries are cut, unemployment's rising. So there's a lot of insecurity or unsurety in the market that has impacted. I think Lo can also allude to that, but the fact of the matter is that at the moment it's difficult. From another point of view, we can actually say that that the live auctions of animals are actually the price discovery system in the beef industry to a great extent, and that this has also been impacted, of course, because the demand has just disappeared to a great extent. And then we saw that weaner prices dropped from something like 34 Rand to 25 Rand in a matter of 2 weeks. Slaughter prices dropped from 47 to 40 and below. In the pork side, this also happened. Pork prices have gone down to below during the listeriosis problem we had. So from the producer side, it's been a bit of a difficult time. The fact is, furthermore, that in the last week, if I take private live auctions as a parameter or to see what's happening, prices came back a little bit. I think that has a lot to do with the announcement by our president about the 500 billion money injection into the economy to make it possible for consumers to be able to enter the market again. I think it's not going to rectify itself before we get to a stage where this whole issue of the coronavirus is something behind us. It's going to be an up and down ride. It's going to be very difficult. I think it's going to put us back to about 2-3 years. Most probably, in the economical side, it's going to impact on the small farmers. The unintended consequences are that if you know that animal sales or live animal auctions, that 73% of the company that I represent comes from small farmers. In other words, they sell numbers between 1 and 10. And the unintended consequences of what's happening now is that the small farmer and the new emerging farmer is actually taking the knock. And I'm in doubt whether they're going to survive this.
Right, thank you, Pierre. While we're more on the livestock side, I'm going to ask Lo. Lo, you run a huge feedlot operation, very integrated with abattoirs and into the retail even. The demand for meat, and how do you see the demand side playing out into the future? We see disturbing stories of what's happening in the United States where meat packaging firms are closing down. I watched last night on CNN, 3 of these packaging firms closing down, and they're talking of millions of pounds of meat, as they call it, going to waste and then and not being used, and also culling or euthanizing animals. How do you see the red meat industry playing out? And then secondly, what do you do in a big operation as you yourself have if you have COVID problems identified amongst your personnel?
Thank you, John, and thank you for the opportunity. It's a great privilege to sit here and talk with you, and also to have Pierre on the line. I appreciate that we don't have all the answers, but maybe we can highlight some of our past experiences, as maybe use that forecast what we're going to do. So what we are certainly looking at is that we in our business we adjusted our budget, and we certainly put a reset into the modeling, and really started maybe building a new model from the start based on certain indicators that we could see, where the world is going to in our trade, because they are a little bit before us, maybe 2 weeks, although we're catching up quite a bit. We can see that the international trend in the plants certainly closing down hasn't happened with us, and I'm meaning us, the western part of the hemisphere, like Brazil and the South American countries, also the Northern American countries, have all had closing down of facilities on the beef and on the pork, but in Brazil, especially on the chicken. So we could see that has had quite a significant influence. And but on the eastern side, towards Australia and New Zealand, we haven't seen that. So we forecasting that it will most probably happen here as well, and that's a big problem. So what we're trying to do is to isolate maybe what we have. We in South Africa are very, very fortunate that we have been exposed to viral diseases in many ways. So for instance, in our business, we didn't have to do much adjustment to be able to secure and protect the people because we are using the equipment and the sanitizing already right through the business because of that. So we had to maybe look at other ways of trying to do business, and that has been a great challenge. So for the future, I think it's unpredictable, but we're going to struggle to sell the meat. We sometimes had to do compromises, like for instance, cut some of the round cuts into trimmings, and we simply can't do it anymore because we can't sell the trimming. And it's kind of like you go down the chain and you compromise on your price from 60 Rand down to 30, and that is all done through product that is lying in stock. So it's really a challenge, really getting to that. So some of the plants from my US counterparts that we're listening to, and some of our directors that work in that field in the US, just saying that some of those plants are just very happy to be closed down because they can't sell the product. And so this is really getting to an extreme event. Yes. I don't know, whether that answers your question on the demand side.
Yes, I think there's a lot of uncertainty as to exactly what's going to happen and how the demand side is going to be influenced. I think we're all very concerned about the demand side and especially the informal market, which is nearly 40% of our agricultural market, food market in South Africa, and the way that has actually been decimated, it's been destroyed, and the access to food for the informal sector, and then also for your indigenous population, your poor population, really has become a big problem, both from a physical and point of view, but also from a markets or from an economic access point of view. Donnie, I want to get to you as chairman of Singvest. Singvest is an aggregator. It plays an incredible important role in aggregating produce and then distributing to processors, etc. So it's very much a strong linkage point in the value chain. How do you see the role of agri-businesses as aggregators playing a role in future? And are the links going to be made shorter, more direct? How do you see the future of an agribusiness like Singvest, especially from a grain perspective?
John, yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I think we know nothing yet about Corona, and we don't know what will impact, but we need to plan what we think we can do. At this stage in South Africa, in the maize value chain, we got certain problems because of the quality of the crop the last 2 years, and not good. We got imports from Africa from maize and milli meal. So there's really a shortage in the short term, and I think we need to manage that there will still be stable food on all the places, and all the mills got maize. The late rain will also have an impact on the tempo in which the new crop will get to the market. But I think in a month's time from now, that will be sorted. The way is looking forward. If we look what's happening with maize in the United States, 40% of their corn goes to ethanol, and all that ethanol plants start closing because they compete with crude, and we all know what's happening with crude. So there will be surplus of maize in the world for the next year or two, and that will definitely impact on our farmers. It will definitely impact on what happened. Also, what's happening is that the rand-dollar exchange rate that makes tractors and farm equipment very expensive. But on the other side, oil is cheap, so diesel will be cheap for the next year or two. So there are really a lot of challenges, and I think we haven't got people which is ill at this stage of COVID on the farms, also in our value chain. And if that's also start happening, when you've got problem with your workforce and you need on the intake side of maize, as well as on the outset to the millers, and that will also be problems. At some stages, you need to close some of your operations because of COVID in your operations. So, John, this is really a challenge, and we need to live day by day what is happening the next few months.
It was very interesting in a discussion I had with Francois. When feelers say you're troubleshooting every day, it's crisis management basically on a day-to-day basis as we run into problems.
And I think if as a farmer, in your value chain, what you need to look at fertilizer, seed, fuel, because maybe this year get that stuff to your farm a month or two earlier. Because when it's planting time and your inputs is not with you, maybe you'll have a problem on the logistics side to get that inputs there. So I think everybody in the value chain needs to plan what can happen if somebody can't deliver, and that's very important.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think that's very sage advice to the farmers to do planning upfront and purchase your inputs earlier. Donnie, Jaco, if I can get to you. Jackie, you very involved in Grain SA, but also in Agri SA. How do you see the shifts in markets with maize and wheat and sunflower and soybeans especially too? Because it seems as though that we may have shifts in what we're producing. Saw photos of the farmers in the Western Free State starting to plant wheat again. Is it an opportunity? We see that wheat imports might be restricted coming into South Africa. We're still importing roughly 2 million tons of wheat. How do you see the different commodities changing in this COVID-19 phase and then even post-COVID-19?
John, I think for a start, what we see the economic effect of this whole COVID thing on our whole population. And I think it's safe to assume that the population will get poorer. Now, what we see as a population gets poorer, they tend to move back to staples because it's a cheaper foodstuff. So we certainly saw the increase of maize, or maize meal specifically, over the past year or two, and I think that's going to continue. And if you talk to the mills, you also hear that their output is way higher than it was even a year ago. So we certainly see a move towards maize, especially, and I think the same will go to other foodstuffs like wheat and others. So there's certainly a change and a shift. I think in terms of production, the price will determine. If the maize price follows the US price, Dani just alluded to the 40% that's going into ethanol, and that will most certainly have effect on the maize price in the US. And in our maize price as well, the rand dollar is certainly helping us, but that can really speak to the profitability of the grain farmer. In terms of wheat, what we see now with Russia closing their market, the Chinese are buying up some foodstuffs as well, and that will most certainly create an opportunity for South African farmers. And I think this can also see a shift in government, the stance that government has towards local production. So if we get more protection in terms of the wheat market, there's certainly opportunities to expand in the in the wheat market. But what we should take cognizance of, this ban of alcohol, and maybe it's not a long-term ban, but that will certainly have effect on people as well. There's some barley hectares that needs to shift now towards other commodities, because the consumption of something basic like beer will most certainly die down, and barley needs to get a new market. So the Western Cape guys and some of the irrigation guys need new crops they can plant. So they will probably move into wheat or corn or something else. So how it's going to play out, we don't know, but we will see, I think, in the longer term, a more protectionist government that so certainly would promote more locally produced foodstuff.
So farmers will have to watch the markets. They'll have to make sure that there's a market for their product. Firstly, what the impacts of different factors are on those markets, price movements, consumer patterns that are changing. I think this is all a very dynamic time. It's uncertain, but these are all factors that every producer must take into consideration, and every value chain player for that matter. And price signals are going to be, or market signals are going to be very important to monitor over the next time. Omri, I want to get to you. You head up as CEO of Agri SA, the largest farmer organization. What are you advising the farmers in this uncertain time around participation in markets, value chain participation, and how they must adapt to this environment, this new normal, and even while we're still in the crisis, but even post the crisis, things are going to change. What are you advising your farmers at the moment?
Well, thank you, John. Thank you for the opportunity from Sende's side as well. Well, I guess, the main point of advice would be to remain calm and deal with your business as you deal with it in times of rapid change. So what we've seen, and Jaco's alluded to it, is what we've seen is a contraction in the value chain. We've had particular problems with the wool industry, the cotton industry, the mower industry that couldn't export their products or they couldn't transport their products. But I think from an organized agriculture perspective, I think we've mobilized all our members very well. I mean, we've got weekly meetings with them. We try and understand what the main constraints are and how we solve them. For example, just another example is the wine industry. Where there's a massive contraction, then there was transport limitations on wine, so and I think one of the challenges that we've been experiencing is people interpret the regulations in different ways. So we even had to go and get legal opinions from the SAPs to make sure that they don't stop let's say a wool bundle that's on its way to the market. Wool auctions have been affected. It's basically, and this just makes you realize if you look at the whole value chain, how little people actually know about how value chains work and how the pricing in the value chain looks. I mean, we added a price reduction on milk, for example. That happened because the milk processors cannot manufacture cheeses and stuff they put on pizzas and fast food type of outlets. The same is happening in the potato industry. I mean, nobody sells chips. Luckily now you can get drive-throughs and Uber Eats, and so we're trying to get that going. But I think it's an important message maybe to share with the consumers is that they understand how it works, because it's actually a very sophisticated chain and it differs from. So I think we've been working. Here we can hear you. I think we work in these times. If we didn't have structures like ourselves and yourselves and companies working together, I think we would have been really, really in deep trouble.
Yeah, I can see that now. I think the service both from your side and from our side to the whole value chain has actually been enormous. I think government have appreciated it enormously that we could cooperate to get really good first-class information into the decision-making bodies, the National Joint Command Center, and even higher level, cabinet level, etc. And I think that's why agriculture is actually in a very beneficial situation in terms of other industries having been opened up totally. So I think, if I may say so, our advocacy efforts have been heard very clearly, and I think they've responded very well to that. I think there's a great appreciation too from the consumers, also learning more about food and how valuable our food system is. Pierre, I want to get back to you. You're head of Agri SA, as we said just now. The issue of localization. We've seen that agricultural trade or trade in general across the world has been impacted very negatively, and that we're going to probably be more dependent on own production in South Africa. That's why I even think some of the wheat industry might be making some of a comeback. So we're going to produce more for ourselves, both from a national point of view, but even from a local point of view. How do you see this panning out? More local markets developing, more entrepreneurship in developing those local markets. We've seen that the fresh produce markets, while we have a fantastic on paper system in South Africa, the management by municipalities has really not been good. They've not invested in these. And we see there where we have private sector opening up fresh produce markets. I think ZZ2 in Moketsi is probably the best example, but even Cape Town fresh produce market. Do you think this localization is going to expand after COVID?
Okay, John, I would say, look, in the rural areas where I come from, fact of the matter is we take the market to where the market is. In other words, especially in the livestock industry, when you look at it, you take the auction to where the market is. In other words, everywhere is local because you've got a big footprint. Because you take the service to where you get the sellers and you take the buyers over there. so that you can get a transaction done. But most probably you will also know, and Lo will also tell you, that the fact of the matter is that the abattoirs for the slaughtering of animals are all in the rural areas in any case. Maybe a bit overtraded to a certain extent. So whether we are going to move into the value-added side of it and the export of products, if we can't use it from a local, that depends on the quality of those different infrastructures to be able to register to export, which is an expensive venture. So if we look at it, the small farmer is always going to be dependent on the value chain as a whole, and the focus will be on the production side and not so much on the marketing side. So we'll always need the services to those people or those small farmers, and most farmers for that matter, to be able to do that. Only about 5% or between 5 and 10% of farmers are actually in the position to further themselves in the value chain. In other words, get into the market and branding themselves and their own products and so on, which is unlikely in the short term that this is going to happen. But I think the market is moving towards that. Technology is making it possible. The traceability issues are making it possible. So I think we're going to move forward. As far as that is concerned, I think the consumer will decide. And the consumer will decide that they want to see the product, they want to know where the product's coming from. And I think in the next few years, if you can say that's what's happened now, we're learning it's a steep learning curve, and we're learning how to do these things at a fast rate. I would like to think that this can happen, although from the local market side, if we have more poverty and less demand, we will have to position ourselves to the export market to a great extent if we want to grow agriculture. Otherwise, we're going to see a deflation in the agricultural sector, where the new reality will be completely something else. And if the demand is not there, so we will have to find the markets in a different manner. And I think the value chain will also have to become far more efficient. The reaction time between what happens on the farm or what the farmer gets for these products and what's happening on the prices towards the consumer is a bit too slow. We don't see that happening the way that it should. You don't see as far as I could ascertain, you couldn't see anything happening on consumer level as far as prices are concerned with the off-takers. So I would say that the competition is there. There's enough competition, but there was I think it's got a lot to do with not being sure, not confidence in the market as it is, because people are becoming conservative businesses because they don't know what the new reality is going to look like.
Yes, thank you, Pierre. Very good point. And I think, as you said, the consumer is going to dictate a lot of what happens in terms of they want to know where their product comes from. They want to see the traceability systems in place. And to grow agriculture, we're going to have to grow our export markets. Now, we've done that fairly well in the old environment, if I can call it, because the pre-COVID environment. And one of the pioneers of that with beef exports has been Lo. And Lo, I think Pierre makes a very valid point. You've really been at the forefront of opening the beef market for exports. How do you see that market playing out? It seems as though the world beef market or the meat market in general, also with the problems that they had in China with African swine fever, etc., has changed the world protein market or meat market totally. Do you see bigger opportunities for us, and are you ready to access those opportunities, and what must we get in place to access that? Because I really think the beef industry is one of those industries with the most potential, but we've got key role players like yourself that are going to have to make it happen.
Yes, John, I think that the real essence of your question is in the word access to the export market. And the answer to that, to a great extent, is trust, because we need to we need to make sure that we have in the value chain from the government side, as well as the producers and the extensive production side, we have a level of trust that we can really gain access to those markets and in a collaborative way. Because at this stage, and that was, let's say, pre the dawn of export, which is actually in our industry really only from 2014, where the shift came, where we were net exporters of meat, or we produced more and we could export the meat plainly, for, from an input side. Now the problem with the imports really were at that stage is that we didn't have much control over it. So there was a lot of product that could come in from countries where we didn't really control the quality of it, but we had to do the quality on the export side. So that was, to us, that was the main shift where we could get that right. And I think the access to some of these markets is difficult. It's really difficult. It's difficult in the political sense because we don't have good interface with some of the bilateral discussions that are happening. But I think it really is an example of what we can achieve. And this is most probably is going to result in also creating a value chain for the feed and for the maize and for other staples as well, into that chain. But the point is, we are still working on it, and we have made a lot of strides in a positive sense. I'd just like to maybe add a little bit for those that don't know that we are still exporting in this difficult time, and government has really done, with the likes of the good work that you, John, and Agbiz have done. We can continue to export because we've got the trust of government that can really understand why it's so important for us to continue, and that really helps. Certainly helped in our case to continue doing business. And I think that most probably is an example of what really needs to be done with the whole value chain. African swine fever, as what you called it, had a huge influence on exports in total. But we haven't, since COVID in China and African swine fever in China broke out, we haven't heard much of a foot and mouth disease, in the true sense in the world. And so those influences were much greater than what we have in this country or out of Africa. So again, it just shows you that the consumer is really the one that dictates. And if they want the product and they want the assurances, then we need to put it there. And again, for us, foot and mouth disease, and in the greater sense, from that perspective, is something that we could control. And again, we had the help from government to be able to do that. We isolated provinces like Limpopo and some districts that borders the Kruger National Park, and that really helped us to be able to export and continue to export where we are now as well. So although ASF has had an influence, some time ago, it certainly is. It's not a factor anymore. China really just came back with production, and they've really actually increased the pork production in China. But at the moment, we saw that because of that, there was a time lag, and we're still gaining access into some markets into China because the people have got more assurance, or the customers got more assurance in our system than what they've got in the local production of pork. So that just shows you again, you need to get to the consumer, and you need to do what they want.
Just getting back to the consumer, I want to ask a question. We've had correspondence over the last 2 days to the importance of QSRs, quick service restaurants, and and easier access to food, especially for the poorer population. How does that impact on your business? No?
Sorry, John, I didn't get that. But your question on the QSRs are very relevant. We have got maybe 3 main lines of product that we sell, and some of it through the byproduct goes into leather and all the other means, cats and dogs foods. But the most important one for us is the product that we sell that goes into maybe burger patties or maybe just sausages as a mince. So that product we couldn't sell, and we're still having a great difficulty in selling that. So the closure of the restaurant and obviously that includes the QSRs, that really had a great impact on our business. So what we're trying to do is to build stock, but we've got so much stock now already that we simply have to start exporting that product at a lower price. So it's just a case of we had an infrastructure built in this country to be able to sell a product through a certain means, and that infrastructure is now closed, and we have to use other means. So I don't foresee that will change within the next month or two. So it's going to have back in the value chain. It's certainly going to have an influence on the farmer. So they're certainly going to get maybe less for their product, or we'll have to have another means of selling the product. So if the rand, for instance, deteriorates further, then we could maybe export the product at the relevant price. But at the moment, it's quite severe.
Yeah, I suspect that we're going to have to look at the export market more, and I think there are going to be opportunities even into Africa. We're in discussion because the food security situation in Africa is dire, and we do have surplus products, and we are talking to the World Food Programme, the FAO, the World Bank, IMF, right at the moment in securing food for Africa at much bigger quantities, and that will also even impact into the meat market. So let's watch the space, try and see if we can diversify our destinations in terms of exports. I want to, Donnie, get back to you. In this time of uncertainty, how do the farmers perceive an agribusiness like Sinvest in terms of guidance, in terms of product, and assisting them with access to inputs and general advice in keeping their businesses sustainable? I think everybody is trying to see how do they manage their businesses in this critical time, keeping cash flow going, trying to survive the crisis. I think that's the sort of the strategy that everybody's trying to take. Obviously, you have a huge client base within Sinvest, and how are you managing the farmers to ensure their sustainability?
John, thank you. I think at this stage, Sinvest is well positioned in this market. The silos are running fully. The branches, the turnover the last month was only 50% because we can just sell essential products and essential services, and that's farmers. So the public, we can't sell anything to them. Then I think the other thing is logistics. We need to look for the farmers for logistics, for any stock they need. And I think my advice to farmers is that get your fertilizer and seed on the farm for the next season, as well as fuel, because we don't know what will happen with COVID-19, and maybe some companies could not deliver in this difficult stage. I think the other thing which is important is money and liquidity. We all know what happened with Land Bank the last 2 weeks, and that will have a major problem to farmers and co-ops because of the liquidity. So make sure that you got money and that your finance is in place for the next crop. The other thing I think is that there will be a lot of consolidations in the market because of smaller companies and even big companies who got liquidity problems, and there will be opportunities opportunity for consolidation in the next 6 months, and I think a lot of agribusinesses will end up with other agribusinesses. And then I think the other important thing is we got a common enemy in South Africa now, which is COVID-19. And we need to work together. And at this stage, everybody is working together on this: government, private sector, and even the trade unions, because we need to fight this virus, and there will be a shift in the free market and closely to government, and as well as the unions which want to protect jobs. And I think there will be a new norm, and maybe my fears is that there will be some attacks on the free market about this one. So we really need to work with government, but to ensure that the free market stay intact. And I think that's a job for Agri SA, for Pierre and yourself at AgBiz, John, to make sure that we work together with government, and that the free market stay intact through this thing. And I think maybe the last thing is we got a social responsibility to everybody in South Africa to make sure that there's food for everyone. And everyone must be a good citizen, and I think we must take that responsibility and help where we can, because of food security and a lot of people who can't get money and who haven't got enough food to eat.
Thank you, Donnie. Absolutely relevant point. Jaco, I want to actually carry on with that point, and I want to get your perspective on this, because you sit in a very strategic position, having been chairman of Grain SA and deputy president of Agri SA now. And the president alluded to that yesterday in his Freedom Day speech, is our society is becoming more unequal, whether we like it or not. And COVID has actually shown up those inequalities even further. And what's going to happen with COVID is the bigger guys are going to survive more easily, and the smaller guys are going to get pushed out, and which is just going to exacerbate the inequality situation in South Africa. We're already sitting with a challenge that Laura alluded to, in that, and Pierre himself alluded to, is that we overproduce in South Africa, and now we've got to find new markets, but we also have a lot of political pressure to get new entrants, new emerging farmers into the system. So how are we going to do this? Government have not been very successful, have actually failed at establishing new farmers. Their land reform policy has not worked. We're sitting with over 4,200 plus acquired farms that are not in operation. And how is private sector going to participate in bringing in new producers and growing the opportunities for agriculture? If you listen to the politicians, they all holding out for one sector to resurrect this economy. Previously, it was tourism and agriculture. Tourism is dead now. At the moment, the only sector that they're really looking to is agriculture, and I actually fear that the responsibility on us to be more inclusive, to create new opportunities, create new markets. This, I think, is going to become probably one of our biggest challenges, because government are going to try and prescribe a new economic system. Yes, we must keep the markets open, but then we will have to show more inclusivity. I'd like to have your thoughts on that.
Yeah, John, I think it's a long discussion, and I think we had this discussion already a lot in the past. But things have changed now, and I think the biggest thing, the way we're going to do it is with government. And what we've seen over the past 2-3 weeks, and quite a few have alluded to it, is that the working relationship with government is a lot better. So I think for a start, we've now got the ear of government, and buy-in of government that we want the best for the country. And I think that's a good starting point to discuss on how we as private sector as well as public sector, the government, can do exactly what you asked for. And I think this crisis is actually an opportunity for that. As Dani alluded, even in the agri-businesses, there's going to be some restructuring, and that creates opportunity for new entrants. The thing about it actually is, or the problem is just the money. So the money is now directed towards keeping the country running and keeping people on ground level fit, and keeping the hunger away. And what we need in agriculture is the right spending of money. The 1.2 billion that was approved 2 weeks ago for spending on small and sustainable agriculture, if you use that in another way, if we could have collaborated with government and used that in a better way, I think we could have done a lot more in terms of transformation in the sector. But the opportunity most certainly will come, and I think if we can work better with government, we can get the allocation of money towards better projects, more worthy projects. I think the transformation will most certainly be a lot faster than it was in the past. But what we need to do is keep up this relationship with government, keep up the trust of government that we can discuss this even more, get to a better solution at the end of the day. One thing I just want to allude to, John, what we also need to understand in this COVID crisis, the interdependency of the whole economy. What we've seen, just small example in terms of couriers, the parts shops are open, so you can get your parts from Johannesburg into a small town like Kroonstad through the courier, but the courier isn't transporting anything else. So now, where you had to wait 1 or 2 days for parts, you now wait a week, and the cost of that is going to increase as well. And you can expand that to exports. A ship doesn't only export one product, it exports a lot of products. So if it's only agricultural products that can be exported, the cost of that and the timing of that will increase most certainly. So the crisis is far from over. Dani alluded to the supply chain as well into the agricultural sector. And the supply chain, we had stock, and I think that's maybe why we could have continued. But when the stock is depleted at the closest stores, you need to get it from further, and that's going to have a certain impact on production and food prices at the end of the day.
Thank you, Dani. Omri, I want to get to you. Jaco and Dani all alluded to the role that government must play or is going to play right now, but then also later. And Lo also mentioned the assistance that we've had from government in managing foot and mouth, and that we've been able to keep our markets open, our export markets. You obviously at the interface with government around policy, legislation, etc. What is your view? How do you perceive government? Where do they want to take agriculture, and what do they want to achieve with agriculture?
Thanks for the question, John. And I think and we often talk about it, is strategically we need to come up with a plan and with government implement the plan. So I just look at what they did in Australia. So we had the CEO and the president of the Australian Farmers Union. Their government is aggressively investing in commercial agriculture now, because they know that when this crisis is over, which it will be in a year to 18 months, that their agriculture exports are going to be one of the key drivers in their economy. And I think from the work that you and I are doing with the government officials, I think we're gaining traction in terms of getting buy-in from them. You know, if you just look at and Dani also spoke about it, the liquidity in the whole system is under such strain now.
I want to get back to the liquidity issue, and Pierre, perhaps I can get to you. the land bank issue is a real crisis. It's much bigger than what we anticipate. Government's ability to bail out the land bank is a matter of huge discussion because they can't help Eskom anymore. They've just gone into big loans with the World Bank, the New Development Bank, etc., for the 500 billion stimulus package. What is your position on the land bank? Should it be saved? Should the commercial banks pick up the books, etc.? How do we manage the liquidity crisis? Because I think we're going to have a big liquidity crisis in the next few years in agriculture because the risk is higher. That appetite for risk is uncertain. The land bank doesn't have the means at the moment. Government doesn't have the means. Even the commercial banks are really looking at the risk in the agri-food system.
You know, it means that money is going to become more expensive. The land bank is not what we called in the old days the land bank. The rates will be commercial because the land bank is not going to survive in any other manner. So the development side or capital for developmental agriculture for new farmers will have to be reinvented in a new body because whether our government has got the finances and the money to subsidize at the moment does not look very optimistic. I'm not very optimistic about it. Being a farmer, I'm optimistic in general, but we have to face the fact and the reality that what we're looking at the moment, if we listen to what Nikki Weimar said, the whole world's economy is shrinking. So the competitiveness of ourselves in the export market is also under pressure. It's not going to be that easy because, you know, as Omri said, you know, the Australian government is subsidizing their export to keep their export markets for agriculture. So if you want to get into the export markets in a big way, if that's the way we'll have to go, we're going to find it very difficult to get into those markets if the economies all over the world are shrinking. So what are we looking at? We're looking at a declining price structure in general where the inputs on our country is going to increase because of the weaker rand. Now, if the rand is going to reflect our productivity, we will be in the position where we just have to increase our productivity to be able to address the poverty issue as well as be able to do the development side of agriculture, which is so necessary, which the politicians in our country are expecting for us to do. I think the private sector is the only way to go, and that we will have to gear ourselves to the new reality. And it's going to be a rough ride for the next 3 years. I think it's going to be extremely difficult. It all depends on how long this COVID-19 is going to keep us at home. You just look, you can go from the local GP and ask him how many patients is he seeing or she, and they'll say they're seeing about 30% of what they usually see. We talk about turnovers in companies, in businesses. You hear there's a drop of turnover around about 50%. So the profits are shrinking, if there's any profit left at the moment, most probably not. And then this is going to exacerbate the situation with unemployment. So it's going to be a long haul. As far as I'm concerned, I think the new reality says that we'll have to readjust like we usually readjust in a declining market and declining prices. And it's going to be very difficult because I think the family business, the family farm, is going to be under severe pressure to be able to survive this. And the financing side, the agricultural companies, as such, Dani can maybe allude to that. What will happen if you make a sensitivity analysis of what's happening in an agricultural company? If your turnover is going to drop by something like 20 or 30%, what does it look like then? Because I think it's most likely that in the next coming year, we haven't had the effect yet, that imports are going to be very expensive, and that the input side, thank you very much. The fact that we have a good crop is going to make a lot of difference, but the input side is going to be much more expensive next year. So I'm not a pessimist, but I think it's realistic to say that we are going to have a difficult time, and that we will, the collaboration between different spheres of the economy and the value chain will have to become more efficient for us to be able to survive.
Yeah, perhaps just your thoughts on, I think Donnie mentioned possible restructuring in the bigger agribusiness space to drive those efficiencies. And how do you see the agribusiness space, which is a very important aggregation space and a very important service provision space? How do you see that panning out?
Okay, I think Donnie was correct. He says there's going to be consolidation. Obviously, there's going to be that's going to happen. I think the service levels will start looking differently, and I think that the value chain will have to shorten to take the costs out of it. Where the percentage that the producer is getting of the consumer rand will have to increase for the benefit of all. So we're going to see a restructuring right through the value chain because of the financial situation that we are in. I can't see anything else happening, because if that does not happen, I think in a market economy it happens on its own. The competitiveness is going to cause this to happen. The fact is whether we will be able to increase employment at the same time, because poverty is going to decide what is actually happening in this country. If we don't do something about this, we are in for big trouble, as far as I'm concerned. Because if hungry people, you can't. If you don't have something to create jobs for people to become employed in this new reality, we are going to be, because at the end of the year there's going to be another 600,000 school leavers that comes into the economy. And I suppose somebody said just now that it's possible that 1.5 million jobs have been destroyed already. And the government's ability for social support is not that big either anymore. So I think that the only option we have is to sharpen our pencils, look at the value chain, take out the costs, because that is the only thing that we can do, and become more efficient. And in that way, we will be able to employ and do something about unemployment. And I think if we can do that, the consumer will be in a position to buy our products.
Thank you very much, Pierre. Absolutely. Donnie, I just want to get to you. If you had to advise farmers now, what would be the 3 most important messages that you would get to them? Because Pierre said, and I think rightly so, is that the farmer or the family farm is going to come under enormous pressure in the next 3 years at least. What sort of advice would you give to a farmer to survive? I think we're all going to be in a survival mode over the next 3 years. What sort of advice would you, what are the pointers that you would give him to survive?
John, dankie. Ek dink ek moet hierdie miskien in Afrikaans antwoord. Ek dink wat baie belangrik is, rentekoerse het 2 persentasiepunte gedaal. Ek dink rentekoerse gaan verder daal, maar daarna gaan rentekoerse baie vinnig styg. Die rand-dollar verswakking het gemaak dat graanboere se produsenteprys styg. Hierdie is 'n geleentheid vir enige familieboerdery om die boerderyskuld te verminder. Jy moet jouself regrad vir die volgende 4-5 jaar. Ek dink wat baie belangrik is, maak seker jy kry jou geld van jou produk. Moenie jou goed nou verkoop aan iemand wat 20 en 30 rand 'n ton meer betaal, maar jy het nie sekerheid oor geld nie. Ons sien al hoe meer maatskappye buitekant wil die boer se balansstaat gebruik om homself te cover en om homself te hedge. Moenie toelaat dat jou balansstaat deur ander ouens gebruik word in hierdie tyd. Ek dink maak seker jy's reg met jou insette vir volgende jaar. Sorg dat jou kunsmissaad diesel betyds op die plaas is. Diesel is baie goedkoop op hierdie stadium. Inteendeel, hy gaan R2 val volgende maand, die maand daarna nog. So hou jou dieseltanks vol. Ek dink dis belangrik. En dan ek dink miskien die belangrikste. Sorg dat jou werksmense so min as moontlik blootstelling kry, dat jy hierdie ouens gesond hou. Probeer kos en alles na hulle toe bring en laat hulle nie hoef dorpe toe te gaan nie. Ek dink dis belangrik. Ek dink dis die enkele belangrikste goed van my kant af wat ek vir die produsente wil sê.
Baie dankie Dani. Ek dink dit is absoluut 'n uitstekende advies. Jaco, as ek na jou toe kan terugkom. Binne die graanbedryf, ek dink jou insetkoste is natuurlik 'n massiewe uitdaging. Hoe moet boere te werk gaan met hulle insetkoste?
Ek dink die insetsnyptang is 'n ding wat ons al lankal oor praat. En ek dink juis in hierdie tye is dit 'n ding wat eintlik ons baie gaan bekruip. Ons besef ons insetpryse is 90% internasionale pryse gekoppel, so dat die rand-dollar gaan dit besteek baie negatief impakteer. Wat ons egter moet besef, die rand-dollar het maar die laaste maand wesentlik beweeg, maand en 'n half. So daar is dalk nog ouer produkte wat in die store kan lê, wat 'n ou dalk teen billiker pryse in die hande kan kry. Dieselfde met die uitsette. Die uitset hier's geleentheid bepaal om goeie pryse te kan kry waarteen jy met jou huidige oes goeie geld kan maak. Die uitdaging gaan in die volgende oes lê. Ons weet nie wat gaan die rand-dollar maak nie, maar sou hierdie rand-dollar versterk en jy het insette teen duur gekoop en jy met jou uitsette jou produkte teen goedkoop verkoop, kan dit groot krisisse wees. So ek dink die belangrike een is dat jy jou verhouding met jou insetverskaffers nou opbou en uiters goed opbou en laat jy so naby as moontlik aan hulle loop. En laat jy jou verskansel volgende jaar se oes. Ek dink dis die twee belangrikste goed wat 'n ou kan doen. En dan weer terug na jou eie boerdery. Probeer jouself so effektief as moontlik kry. Gebruik jou vennote en gebruik jou mense rondom jou om jou te help dat jy jou effektiwiteit kan opstoot. Dani het gepraat van skuld, dis 'n geleentheid om jou skuld te verminder. Hier's dalk 'n geleentheid om jou boerdery te verbeter in ander opsigte, maar ons moet hierdie geleenthede gebruik, laat ons kompeterend kan raak. Terwyl dit in die res van die wêreld lyk in Amerika asof hulle baie druk op hulle veral hulle mielieprys gaan kry. In Brazil en daai gedeeltes is daar ander uitdagings, maar ons moet daai uitdagings gebruik binne ons eie boerdery en ons eie praktyke in die land, om te kyk of ons nie meer effektief en meer kompeterend kan kom teenoor die ander.
Ja, baie dankie. Ek dink daai doeltreffendheid van insette gebruik gaan baie krities wees vorentoe. Baie dankie daarvoor. I want to start wrapping up, so I'm going to start asking for closing comments from each of you. Perhaps I can start with you. I hope we got your audio back. But you mentioned the plan that we need to make, and I fully agree. We need that. We started with that master plan initiative. Unfortunately, COVID has overtaken that, but it's going to come back, and it's going to be very important that we do develop some sort of social compact or a master plan. The problem is the dynamics in South Africa and Australia are vastly different. And how do we get the compromises right in terms of developing agriculture and also growing the commercial and also making our markets work? So closing comments on that, please.
Yes, John, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I think, one thing that we need to do is we need to look at best practices, because we're not the only guys that have gone or that is going to go through this that has a developmental angle in our agriculture industry. But I think government also needs to realize this is a new normal. It's not business as usual. I mean, there's a very interesting, for the listeners, there's a very interesting little video clip on Netflix about COVID-19 explained. That takes you through all the pandemics, over the centuries, the Spanish flu, smallpox, and SARS, and MERS, and now COVID. It's just the impact that had on the world. So we also need to view that from a perspective as to what opportunities we will be able to create as a private sector with support of government, if that's possible, fiscally, and then see what we can do to the whole commercial sector is going to come under severe pressure in any event. The whole economy is under pressure. We've discussed it earlier, but I mean, the tourism industry is dead at the moment, and it's going to be for the rest of the year probably. So hopefully this creates the opportunity to focus on 4 areas of competence that we can help fire up the economy. And when you're in a crisis like that, people quickly forget about things that are. People try and focus on solutions, and hopefully, with the president, the measures that they've taken so far, I think, is in line with global best practice, and maybe that's an indication of how we can work together going forward.
Thank you, Omri. Now I'm going to come to you. Closing comments from your side. Where should we be going? How do we build the relationships with government and with the developing sector? And how do we grow the markets? Perhaps just a wrap up from your side and some pointers for the broader industry, for the broader value chain.
Yes, John. I think that obviously we've got opportunities, and I think we in our businesses we certainly need to look at what the opportunities give us. And one of those things that I think that you, the panel, have really alluded to is to look at your cost of capital, and maybe we're going to have a reduction. So there's an opportunity, and maybe if you can at this stage try to make your debt less in the business. I think that's an opportunity as well. But on the businesses side, for us, there's many things that we can change to be able to get our costs still further down and try to gain access to markets where we can get better pricing. But the main thing is that we need a lot of help from government to gain access to the new markets in some other countries, and some of our other African countries have really done very well in that. So we can use that as a springboard to maybe just get into some other countries and some other markets. But what I can say is that at this stage, John, I really think that the opportunities outweigh necessarily the negatives or maybe the threats that we have with COVID-19. We can really make a difference in our industry and maybe just put it into a different sphere going forward for the foreseeable future. So I think that the industry is going to do well, and we certainly would like to see that the farmers do well, and that they can get more revenue more cash flow into their business, so that we can have better growth. We've grown this industry, the beef industry, by maybe doubling it over the last 20 years, and I think it's going to double again, and maybe over a shorter period of time, simply because we've got better efficiencies, better systems, and we've got better markets.
Thank you. No, that's great to hear, and I fully agree. There are going to be plenty of opportunities, probably even more opportunities, but they're going to come in different ways. We're going to have to manage our businesses differently, but certainly a lot of opportunity. See the value chain developing forward, and what would your message be to everybody in the value chain out there? Jaco, I just wanted to ask you to speak up a little bit. Your sound is a bit low. If you can just get closer to the microphone too. Thank you, Jaco.
Thank you, John. I think that the challenge is going to be to stick to what's working, stick to what you know is your strength, build on that, but also be resilient. I think things are going to change a lot in the next month or two or year. This thing is going to be with us for maybe 2 or 3 years, and we've got to be resilient. If things change, we need to adapt to that. We need to be ready to adapt to it without forgetting what our primary causes are and what our primary we really need to stick to that. The other one is we need to remember that we live in a community. We're not isolated. We cannot do things by ourselves. We need to do things as a community. And I think this challenges that we had with COVID, all the stuff that we had to sort out with government just shows us we can't be in isolation. We can't isolate ourselves, protect ourselves, and protect what we have. We need to reach out. We need to be part of the solution rather than to be part of the problem. And I think this new norm will show this to us even more than it had in the past.
Thank you, Jaco. Donnie, perhaps I can get to you for some last comments, some last messages that you want to get out to the value chain and farmers.
John, thank you. I think crisis needs leadership, and I think President Ramaphosa showed us what is leadership the last month or two. And as South Africans, we need to do the right things now. We need to look at all South Africans, all value chains, everybody. Maybe we all leaders in this conference. I think the work starting with you've done what Omri, Pierre, Jaco, and industry from low. Thanks for what you do in these days for South Africa. I think South Africa must be first, and that's even our farmers. They had to look at their value chain. They had to look at their workers and at their market. So let's just put our own interest a bit to the side, and we look to what's best for South Africa for the next 3 months.
Thank you very much. Yes, absolutely. We live in a community. We must remember that we've got to build sustainable communities in the process. I'm going to give you the last word. If you want to wrap up for us, and also your last message to your constituency and to the value chain.
Is it my turn, John?
Yes, Pierre.
Okay. We live in a democracy, and the fact of the matter is we've got 20 million very poor people in this country living under the red line. So affordability of food is going to become a very, very important. It's very important. It's going to even be more important over time. On the other side of the coin, we have the profitability side for the primary producer who is a price taker in this situation. To get this right, we will only, to be on both sides, apart from the export markets, etc., we will, as a value chain, we will have to come together to see what we can do to make this more efficient. Make that more efficient will mean that we'll have to go to government, otherwise the decisions will all be political and not economical, because the people will become more radical, and you'll see radical economic transformation. You will not see realistic economic transformation. So we, as the private sector, will be in a position, we'll have to go and say, okay, as a value chain, we come together. We're going to make the plan and present it to government to say, well, how are we going to actually do something about this and not only talk? In other words, how are we going to stimulate employment in the value chain? How are we going to see that new farmers enter the agricultural primary field? How are we going to make sure that the country survives, and our contribution is in such a manner that we occupy the moral high ground in this position that we are? Because it's not, if you have nothing and you are hungry, you don't listen to so much to the economic side of it. You listen to the political rhetoric that goes around it. And I think the responsibility we have now is so much more than we had a little while ago. If we think about the market was actually running everything, and everybody was doing more business and trying to grow their businesses. Now we have to grow our businesses. We have to be more efficient, and the food must become more affordable, and we must create employment at the same time. And we have to protect the family farm, because the backbone of South Africa is the family farm. It is not necessarily the big businesses, it's the family farm. And for me, from the constituency that I represent, I think it's something that will be from Agri-SA's point of view. The farmers will look at Agri-SA from their point of view, and we will have to listen to what they say, obviously, and then we will have to create the circumstances for the market to be there, the employment to be there, as well as the exports that will have to happen, and we'll have to collaborate with government at a very high level, and the trust will have to be there that we're actually doing our thing correctly.
Thank you very much, Pierre. It has been a great opportunity to get your perspectives. So to Pierre, to Dani, Jaco, Lau, Omri, thank you very much for your participation. I think the insights are absolutely valuable. You are all extreme leaders in the whole agri value chain, and your wisdom, I think, is really sage, and hopefully this message can get out to so many people so that we can take agriculture and this country forward. Thank you once again for your participation, and have a good day.
John, I'm just going to wrap up. It's Francois. Thank you very much. You already said it. Thank you very much for each of one of you who participated, your knowledge and your viewpoints. I will allude to that just a little bit later. Thank you, John, for participating in the professional way in which you accommodated this. This is already the third session we've had, and I would really like all of you to go and look at all the sessions. This is really valuable information. I think the things that came out is the real and the immediate threats, demand and supply chain disruption, labor issues, then also the effect on price and therefore on the choices that farmers will make insofar the selection of their crops is concerned. The next factor is the huge challenge on liquidity, which you alluded to. And we will set up another session now where we put up all the financial institutions, John, so that we elaborate more on the liquidity issue and we get our hands around it. I've already asked Sunmarie to put that up. Then I think the issue is on that liquidity is your own ability as a business to get appetite as far as financial assistance is, and of course, as Pierre has very eloquently put it, the price of that finance. Another aspect is the social structure, and both Jaco and Dani and Pierre alluded to that. It will continue to change and convert. We will see communities coming together especially in the rural areas, and integrating more. Agriculture has always been, in the rural areas, primary agriculture has always been the reaction force, and more so it will become the point that keeps those communities together. I think that's the one thing that farmers get too little admiration for and acknowledgement for, is the way that they sustain the rural communities. I think value chains will restructure, it will readjust, it will reset, it will reorganize now in a forced and on a very fast pace. But the thing that I want to close with, John, what I heard this morning was brave leaders standing up, saying things that others are either too afraid or politically too scared to say. That is what I heard this morning. The advice and the vision that is demonstrated here makes me enormously proud. As someone said, it is now the time to stand up and be counted. And that is what I heard collectively from these leaders this morning. Thank you very much to all. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.